Yo, what's poppin' guys? Sizzle here, and today we're taking a look at all the Galil skins in CS. So first off, we have the just stock Galil skin. Pretty decent, just nice generic stock finish. Looks alright. It's just your standard stock skin. It doesn't look particularly bad or good or whatever. So I think it's just a solid D tier like any other stock skin. Next up, we have our first actual skin, which is the Galil Hunting Blind. Yeah, it's your basic war camo skin. It has that gated meshy camo, but it the pattern in the background actually works with it really well. So it actually ends up looking like a pretty decent camo skin if that's what you're into. I'm not into camo skins, but I will admit this is a pretty nice looking camo skin as far as those go, so I'm gonna put that as a low D tier instead of an F tier. Next up, we have ourselves the Galil AR Sage Spray. Very bright skin with a pretty awful camo. I mean, this one's just super noticeable because of the bright coloring, but the actual design is awful. I don't want to put this too high, but just because it is noticeably different from stock, I feel like it deserves to not be an F tier. So I'm gonna put it in D tier, but I personally would not use this one. Next up, we have the Galil AR Tornado. And this one's kind of clean. I mean, it's kind of dull, as all Tornado skins are, but the colors are split really well, just around 50-50. I mean, it's not perfectly split up here specifically, but every other part of the gun is split really well. You have the nice tan finish on the top, and then the nice blue finish on the bottom. It's pretty just clean, solid skin. Nothing insane, but it definitely is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. The question becomes now, where is it? Because I can't seem to see it on my screen. There it is. Yeah, I think it's a high C tier, possibly low B tier, depending on how the other Galils end up looking. Next up, we have the Galil AR Winter Forest. And this is just a really bright white camo skin with a decent gray finish on this main part of the weapon. Yeah, I mean, that's all there's to say about it. It's a better bright skin, and it doesn't look awful. I kind of fuck with the snowy camo skins for some reason, so I'm more than willing to put this one into the lower end of C tier. I think that's actually the wrong one. Lower end of C tier. It's very noticeably different and looks alright, but it is still a camo skin. Then we have the Galil AR Very Camo, and this is just a worse camo skin than what we had before. The camo on the actual gun isn't that bad, but this weird brown part in the middle looks super out of place and completely removes whatever illusion of camo there was. Might technically be more realistic or whatever, and for people who are into that, you probably already knew that. But for everyone else, it looks pretty awful, and I think it's an F tier. Next up, we have the Galil Urban Rubble, and this one's a darkish camo skin. Not a big fan of camo skins, but this is a pretty unique one. I haven't seen many, darkish, just normal camo skins, so, I guess if you like that, that's good for you. But I think it's just a camo skin. I mean, it's maybe marginally better than stock, or worse, depending on your personal views on it. But yeah, it's nothing insane. Then we have the Galil Cold Fusion. And this one is pretty nice. Uses that toxic waste spin with a skull, skull radiation symbol, camo, but with a pretty nice blue acidic finish. I feel like I've seen a special flavor of Mountain Dew with this exact coloring or whatever. But yeah, the main part of the gun kind of looks a bit out of place with this really dark navy blue. The gray handle looks fine, but this part in the front here looks kind of out of place, but mostly okay. It's got a decent design, decent colors. It's definitely not amazing, but I'd say this one isn't too awful. I'm going to put it in the bottom of C tier. Next up, we have the Galil AR Tuxedo. Nice black and white, very clean Galil. Very like the other ones, this part kind of looks a little out of place, but the black and white are really clean, really beautiful, and just look really solid. I'm gonna honestly put this one in A tier. I really like the way it splits. Maybe it looks a bit worse in game, but I haven't used a Galil in a while, so I wouldn't really know. Next up, we have the Galil Aqua Terrace, and Yeah, it's half stock, which is, you know, minus points. But it has an interesting top, I guess. Very, very bright and just, you know, an alright camo, I guess, on top. But it's mostly stock with just that design. So if you like the design, you'll probably like this one a little, but I don't think the design's that crazy, although it is definitely nice and bright. So I definitely want to put it over the other bright Galil there, but I'm not sure if I'd personally really put in work to get this over stock, even if it was like 3 cents, and, you know, spoiler warning, this one's $100. So I definitely would not be using it. But regardless of price, I think it's only marginally better or worse than stock, depending on how much you like the camo, and I just don't really like it that much, but I can definitely see why people might. Then we have the Galil Dusk Ruins, and yeah, I can't really see most of the skin. The only part of this, like the actual skin camo I can see is this little monkey statue thing with glowing eyes in the back. The front part of the skin is way too congested and complex with some pretty awful color choices that make it really hard to actually see anything here. The actual like stock or whatever in the front here looks super out of place. This bright red handle also looks super out of place. It's just a mess of a skin, and I can't see a good reason to use this unless you want something that's like red-ish. Maybe there's no other red Galil skins and this is your only option, which is very unfortunate. But that might be the reason you use this, but it looks pretty awful. I'm actually going to put this one in F tier. I can't think of a reason where I would want to use this. Then we have the Galil Amber Fade. Mostly stock, but like a slightly cleaner version, looks like. Than with the classic Amber Fade finish in the dead center of the skin, where it'll be a lot more noticeable in game. It's got a nice shine on the front too, even though it's like black. Unlike most Amber Fades, I think this one actually kind of works well. I don't really know what about it works well for me, but it looks kind of alright. I'm gonna say it's probably a solid C tier, just right somewhere in the middle. And yeah, that's really all there is to say about it. Next up, we have the Galil Shattered, which is another brightish Galil skin. This one with like the weird, I think it's origami style pattern. But a generic, almost stock-looking finish in the middle, which doesn't look so good. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of bright, that's all it's got going for it, but unlike the other bright, like, camo skin, I don't really like the design on this one. But I will admit, it is probably better than stock, so I'll put it at the higher end of D tier. Next up, we have the Galil Sandstorm. I remember I used this one for ages. There's a lot of different patterns. You can have more of this bright color, more of this tan color, or purple. It's pretty random based on the patterns or whatever. Wear doesn't affect this one too much either. The actual pattern is, there's something to the pattern, but I don't know what it is. But it's not really too important. The point is that it's a mix of these three colors. They're a weirdly functional set of colors. I don't really know why they work together as well as they do. But I don't know. I kind of like it. It's pretty solid, very hard to go wrong with, but definitely not like S tier or whatever. I'd say we found ourselves our first B tier skin. It's definitely better than the stuff in C tier for whatever reason, probably just because I like the colors. But I can't realistically put this super high either, and this one's kind of worn up a bit. I mean, 0.14 is not a particularly good float. Next up, we have the Galil Blue Titanium. Yeah, it's just got a blue titanium top. I mean, if you like this a little bit better than stock, I mean, the bottom half is still stock, so you have to just like this top part, kind of similar to the Amber Fade. But unlike the Amber Fade, probably because it's so dull, it's not really as appealing to me. So I'm going to personally put this one in F tier, but I can see why someone might use this. It's like marginally different from stock, and if you really like the like blue navy finish on top, that would be why you use this thing. Then we have the Galil Kami, or Kami, whichever one it works. It's a comic strip, just like the 5.7 one, of just random panels throughout the skin. This one seems to have focused on this like Minecraft Steve looking guy down at the bottom here, and then everything else other than like the spoon in the far back that you'll never see is pretty hard to see on this thing. But it is a nice, decent mix of black and white. Like the way the black and white mixed, it's different than the tuxedo, but actually kind of nice. I don't think this one has as good patterns as the 5.7, because the 5.7 of this skin is super focused on like a few pixels of the design, and that makes all the little things like this guy a lot more noticeable. But with so much going on this Galil, it's a lot harder to notice the finer details and finer, like, like the spoon here you would not see unless you're really looking at the skin. So for that reason, it's a bit worse than the one in the 5.7, but it's still pretty solid. I mean, it's a nice bright skin, pretty decent camo to it. I'm gonna probably put it toward the upper end of C tier, because I do really like the idea of, like, the random comic strip skin. Then we have the Galil Rocket Pop. Very, very, very bright skin with decent colors, like a pink, possibly red. I guess it's more like a pinkish red with light blue, dark blue, and white. Kind of like budget American flag. Right, I mean, the name Rocket Pop makes me think of those ice pops, and then the color scheme matches really well. It's very bright, decent like pattern to it, very solid set of colors. Pretty hard to go wrong with, but yet again, I don't think it's particularly amazing either. It really just depends on how much you like the colors. But I think it's another B tier Galil skin where it's really hard to go wrong with, but I don't think it's like the definitive skin. Then we have the Galil Black Sand. That's just your like modernized camo skin. I'm not a big fan of camo skins, I'm not a big fan of the modernized ones, and unlike some of the other modernized ones, I don't think this one looks particularly clean either. I can't realistically put it in F tier, because there's clearly some effort put into it, but for me it's like the lowest of low D tiers that we've gotten so far. Then we have the Galil Akobin, I think it's, or Akobin, I don't know. But yeah, you got some like zebra camo on it with a bunch of random rust here and there, which I guess kind of adds some flavor to it. But yeah, it's just a zebra camo. It's nothing crazy for me. The colors aren't anything insane. The pattern's very straightforward. You either love it or you don't. But I think it's a solid C tier. I mean, you get what you get. It's definitely not bad, but I don't personally find this one too amazing. Then we have the Galil Vandal, which, yeah, it's one of those... it's like the M4A1S flashbang or whatever it's called, where it's got a bunch of like scribbles on it. Don't talk to my gun, bang, bang, bang. There's a skull thing, they drill on the bullets, like flames on the front and back. I think that's the bomb code right there, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know what 505 stands for, other than the infinite 1 and S. I think that's like single fire, like burst and auto. Might be wrong on that. There's like a little heart in the back. There's just a bunch of like random little details. Unlike a lot of the other guns with those details though, this one's really hard to spot the details on. Like part of the cool part with a lot of these like camo things with like wartime drawings on them is you can see a lot of the stuff clearly. But when I look at this thing, I'm like squinting when I'm looking at don't take my gun and bang bang bang. And stuff like that. Like if you're not, if you're on like a mobile device or something, you might have a really hard time seeing a lot of the finer details on here. And if you're playing a game of CS, you're totally not going to notice much outside of this little flame here and then like the bullets. So for me, that kind of removes a lot of the charm from it, and I think it's maybe like a high D tier. I can't realistically put it in C tier when it has like visibility issues. Next up, we have the Galil Destroyer. Yeah, this is an interesting one. I don't think I've ever seen this in game. I mean, it is really new, it's from Recoil. You'd see like this super ultra HD like front part, looks pretty solid. It's got a QR code, probably to the workshop page. And then a very interesting back pattern. I don't really know how to describe what I'm looking at back here, but I do kind of like it. It's an overall very, very clean finish, looks very nice, and I got no real complaints about it. But for me, it's probably just another B tier, but toward the lower end this time. I don't really know what I like about this, unlike the other two, where I can kind of give a rough estimate why I like them. For this one, it just looks pretty clean, solid colors, like HD. It's very nice. Then we have the Galil Cerberus, which is what I'm currently using. I just really liked the yellow color found all over this. But it is still overall pretty solid design. You got like the three-headed hellhounds, Cerberus himself, coming out of the middle of the gun, right where you can see it on your screen. You have this black part in the back, which is kind of random, and I think the whole back should have been black, so that it kind of looks like the dogs are coming off the back of it instead of having this weird little yellow stump here. But like I said, you don't ever see this in a game anyway. So what you do see is, the Cerberus with the yellow eyes, like kind of howling out or like screaming out, or kind of jolting out toward this like radiation with the radiation symbols, and then like a random black tip at the front. It's a pretty decent design, very nice colors. I mainly like it for the colors. I think if this had any kind of different colors anywhere on this weapon, I would like it about half as much. But yeah, I really like the colors. I really like the design. I mean, there's a reason I'm using this Galil. I'm gonna put it as a low A tier. I can't realistically put it above the Tuxedo, though. I think that's a bit cleaner. Then we have the Phoenix Blacklight, which is commonly used and known for being like the purple or pink Galil. It's kind of both. I mean, that's like the main color scheme, and the whole idea, I guess, is a bunch of random graffiti that doesn't really seem to go together all that well. Yeah, I mean, that's the weapon skin for you. That's all there is to it. If you want a purple pink Galil, there does seem to be some other options just from the preview at the bottom here, but it's a decent one. It's got a nice mix of them. Personally, it's not my favorite set of colors, and the pattern isn't particularly amazing or anything, but I can see why people do use this one if they like those colors. Next up, we have the Galil Caution, which, yeah, it's like caution tape across the middle with, yellow and black stripes. It's alright, I guess. I mean, nothing amazing, nothing awful. It's the right colors of yellow and black for the caution tape, but it's not like a particularly amazing design. Definitely is not like I need to reiterate this a few times. It's definitely not awful, but I will be putting in C tier, even though it's really solid, and I can see why someone might really love this. I mean, it is a pretty clean finish on the skin, and definitely well thought out and whatnot. But for some reason, for me, this is just like an inferior version of like the Cerberus. Then we have the Galil Orange GD Pet, which, yeah, it's got that like pixelated camo that we all have come to know. Wouldn't say know and love or know and hate, just come to know exists, because it's on like, there's like 5 of these for every weapon. But yeah, nice color orange, and overall the actual camo part is pretty hard to see. It kind of blends in together to make like a kind of grayish Galil with a bunch of orange dots everywhere, which doesn't look too awful, but definitely doesn't look too amazing. I want to put it as a high D tier. I can't realistically put it with all other stuff in C tier, but it's definitely not god awful or anything. Then we have the Galil Stone Cold, which, yeah, this one's pretty nice. It's a nice like bluish finish. Almost looks like an eagle or like falcon wing or whatever coming off right in the middle here. And otherwise, it's a nice blue outline on like a grayish black center. Looks pretty clean, pretty solid, pretty alright. Nothing insane. Probably just a higher C tier as well. Then we have the Galil Firefight. Yeah, this one's got like an orangish red main part with like a grayish, almost metallic looking, like center and front. It's an interesting combination. Reminds me of like the M4A4 red something. I forget what the name is, but it reminds me a lot of that. I think the Evil Daimyo is what I'm thinking of, but like with slightly worse colors here. It's decent. I mean, decent colors, pretty clean finish, but definitely not amazing colors or a particularly phenomenal finish. So I'm just gonna put it yet again in C tier. Then next up, we have ourselves the Galil Crimson Tsunami. This one's kind of interesting. Very, very nice. Just design. I do always like that, like older Japanese waves. They look really nice. They do look really nice here. They're coming through the main part of the weapon that you'll see, and then it's got like an iffy, just okay-ish red background. I mean, you get this one if you like the wave design. The wave design is very central, very noticeable, and pretty solid looking. And then the red background's just kind of there. But honestly, I do like it a lot. I'm going to put it in B tier. I really do like these waves. Next up, we have ourselves the Galil Signal, which, yeah, very noticeable, like navy blue stuck in the front, and then a mash of like red, like almost like police lights at night, if you know what I mean, just throughout the rest of the gun, and a almost purple looking like mag right here. Overall, just a decent mishmash of colors without any real design to it, but they're like both dull and bright enough that it's noticeable, but no part of the skin is too noticeable or it kind of takes away from the rest of it, which is definitely really positive. But yeah, for me, that's just another solid, probably C tier. I can't realistically put it any higher. Next up, we have ourselves the Galil Connection. I guess that's how you'd say it. It just feels weird. Got a big X, like an orange front. You have the Operation, like, I think that's Phoenix. I think that's Operation Phoenix here. I mean, it even says Phoenix Connection. I guess it's one of those CSGO lore skins, which I don't know much about. But outside the lore skins, I mean, the front is super noticeable, like super unique. I haven't seen anything like this. And then the back is a nice, clean metallic finish, and like just clean finish on like the handle, for example, to kind of go along with that. It just looks nice. Like there's nothing crazy about it, but somehow it goes together really well and is looking really clean, very unique, very nice colors. And I kind of like it a lot. I'm gonna put it in A tier. I know it's probably a bit, you know, controversial, not the right word. It's not like a big controversy, but a bit disagreeable, I think is the word I'm looking for. I can see why people might not agree with me there, but for me, I do really like the way this skin comes together. I'm gonna put it in A tier. Then we have the Galil Eco. This is one I remember using for a while. Absurdly bright skin, just absurdly bright. Mainly white. In-game, what you mainly see is white with a nice green tip. And then you got some nice, like, grass green on the rest of it. It's really bright, really simple, but goes together pretty well. I'm gonna say, yeah, it's a very nice, bright skin. Probably putting this one in A tier as well. If you do want a bright skin, or like the brightest possible skins, this is clearly, I mean, even on the previous skin, it just takes your attention right away. And it looks pretty solid. I mean, it's nothing absolutely insane. It's definitely not awful by any stretch of the imagination. And I think for that, it definitely deserves to be up there. And like, you notice there's very few or maybe even no scratches, despite this being a pretty bad float. It's just a good skin all around. Then we have the Galil Sugar Rush. If you like pink, I would take this skin instead. Got a very nice pink base here, and it's very clearly pink. You got like a little killer bunny rabbit thing. A nice little, you know, diamond checkerboard pattern in the back, and then like these kind of stripes, like gooey stripes going down the bottom here. I think this is a game of like tic-tac-toe in the middle, if I had to guess. And yeah, I mean, it's got a... I don't know what the style is, but it reminds me of like... I don't actually play League of Legends, but there's a character this reminds me of. I think they're called Jinx. And then that reminds me of this skin, that type of art style. I forgot what it's called. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty nice looking just pattern. Very, very nice colors. I mean, actually really nice use of colors here. The white in the front and the top are just the icing on the cake, and then the rest of this is very just well thought out and colored. I'm gonna say, honestly, this one's a very high A tier. Might actually move that and the tuxedo to the S tier, because there's not a lot of skins left. I think those two are kind of on their own tier in terms of Galil skins. Next up, we have the Galil Chromatic Aberration. Which, yeah. This is that one scout skin. I forgot what it's called, but it's like that, but on the Galil. Got these, like, nice pinkish, like, vaporwave stripes or whatever. It got a cool visual effect with the bomb code in the back and AR and just Galil AR. And a bunch of random other symbols. And this part in the front's actually pretty trippy, but I don't think you're ever going to see it looking like this unless you're inspecting the weapon. But yeah, decent design, decent coloring, but nothing mind-blowing, unlike I think what I was talking about when I was looking at the scout version of this. It's definitely not awful, but I think it's just another C-tier skin. Just pretty decent all around. Decent colors, decent pattern, you know, all of the usual stuff. Then our final skin, and the only red Galil skin, is the Galil AR Chatterbox. This one's just solid. I think when you shoot the weapon, or like reload or something, I think when you shoot the weapon, this part here in the back jiggles, so like you kind of see the skull opening and closing its mouth repeatedly, which is kind of funny. It's got a decent color of yellow and like almost like a Fallout Wasteland design to most of it. It's pretty decent looking, but nothing insane. It says feed me over here, so yeah, I guess this does probably open up. But yeah, I mean, it's like a Fallout yellow, just AR with a decent little funny skull thing. I really like the color of yellow used here, and for me that's enough to put it way up there in B tier. For most people this is probably yet another C tier skin, but I do like the colors and like the kind of design to it. So yeah, that's it for all the Galil skins. That's kind of my thoughts. I think the two at the top are really the best two skins, and the stuff in A tier is very usable. But yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next one.